Alright, so for cleaning, you'll notice there's already some Shimano grease down in here. This rail's never been torn apart before. So what I do is I take a Q-tip and I just start cleaning. Now, recommended would be to use lint-free Q-tips, but I don't buy those and don't have them. What we're going to do is we're just going to clean this off real good, everything that we can. And you're going to want a trash can near you because you're going to go through quite a few Q-tips cleaning grease off. And after we do this, once it's nice and clean, we're going to put grease back on it, on all the moving parts. So I'm cleaning down inside here, I'm pushing my lever down. And most of the rail parts aren't going to require oil. They're only going to require grease. And I believe if you decide to go with oil instead of grease, you can do that. However, it requires a much more frequent tear down. It doesn't last as long. So we're cleaning down into everything. So that's what my Q-tip's looking like. It doesn't take a whole lot of Q-tips. This rail is not nearly as dirty as I would have thought it would have been. I think it's had fairly heavy use. Pop the cap, throw that away and grab a new one. Now once I kind of wipe it down good, then I'll get some alcohol and I'll come back in. Right now I'm just trying to clean dirt and stuff out of it. And there is some dirt, if you can see by the Q-tip. I really hope my camera's in focus. I don't have any way to look at it to see, so I apologize. Hopefully it's a good picture. Alright, now I'm going to take this little Tupperware cap and I'm going to squirt a little bit of alcohol in it. That way it just makes it easy. I can just dip my Q-tip in that, get it nice and wet. And I can come back and just start cleaning anything and everything. I'm not trying to saturate it in rubbing alcohol. I'm just using that to help pick up any dirt or grease that's left inside here. I want to be sure and get this back slide where this metal bar goes through that plastic. If you can see, it's pretty dirty. So I'm switching sides here. That's one of the parts that gets a lot of use and it's a little more exposed to the elements. Alright, coming back to the inside of the other side plate. Which it looks pretty good. Okay, so you have a gear inside here, a spool bearing. I'm sorry, not a gear, a bearing. We're going to, I just take my Q-tip and I just rub all around it like that. No big deal. And when I know it's nice and dry, I will take and put 1 drop of oil, no more than 1. And that's all it needs. So I'm going to set that there. 1 drop of oil in it. And I'll just let it be. And then later it'll work its way on in. Okay. So now we have all these parts on this towel here, like this right here, your main gear, your drag washers and all that. So we're gonna now take your main gear and your drag washers apart. So they went in order. I'm going to grab a paper towel, even though I'm on a towel. Just try not to trash my towel. So the order they would come apart would be that. There's a carbon washer. So now we've got the back of the gear. Everything is all nice and greasy. On the top we've got this silver cap. Pay attention to the cap. It's shaped, it's got a raise in it. It's shaped like a hat, okay? When the bearing's facing up. And then you got one more carbon washer in there, which is probably, I think it's carbon fiber. Now, I'll take those and I'll grab a paper towel. I'll wipe them down really well. What we'll end up doing is a lot of times I will leave the parts the way they came out of the reel, and then I'll clean them as I'm putting them back in. Okay, there's your carbon. Look at all that. So that's how much grease we've already gotten out of there that's dirty grease. So your main bearing we're going to clean off real good. Now with all these little, this is a micro gear, so it's got really small tight teeth. So we're going to come back to that one. We're going to clean that out real good with a Q-tip and some rubbing alcohol. Your carbon drag washers, I just pretty much wipe them down real good. Now this washer here on this reel does not have a top or bottom. What you would look for is when you take your main bearing off, some of these will have like an S shape instead of just a nice square tooth. And if they do, that has to go back in that same direction that it came out. So you want to watch that. Alright, so I'm going to grab my Q-tip that's already got some alcohol on it, and I'm going to rub around the inside here. Finish cleaning up where I couldn't reach. And then I'm going to grab another Q-tip and we're going to do the gears. So basically right now I'm just going to wipe, try to go with the gears instead of against them. Get some alcohol down in them. Just trying to get all this old grease out. So it's going to be stained. That's fine. It's just, I think, normal wear and tear, corrosion. But now we're done with that. Okay. So I'll leave that sitting there for now. I'm going to grab this little saddle I was telling you about, and it's got grease inside the saddle. So I'm noting that, because it's going to need grease to go back in it. Clean it off real good. Try to get all the old grease out. And then we'll grab this gear that I don't remember the name of it. Wipe it down real good. It's pretty easy to clean up, but there's still some grease in the gears. So I'll grab a dry Q-tip and start wiping it out. If you can see my Q-tip, it's already starting to turn kind of a bluish color. Okay, so that's nice and clean. These two little springs, they were on these two little rods. They have some grease on them, so I'm going to just kind of roll them in my paper towel. I could soak them in alcohol, but if they look like they're clean, then I'll be fine with that. Okay, so those are clean. Set them back on the towel. The small carbon washer. Wipe it down. The drag, or the main bearing sleeve here, main gear sleeve. I'll wipe it out. It's dirty. A little bit of alcohol in there. Okay. Now I'm going to stop the video and I'll restart again. Alright, continuing on. So inside this side plate here, you have a roller bearing and then you have a spool bearing. The spool bearing is a ball bearing. I don't take the roller bearing out. What I do to it is I'll take a dry Q-tip and I'll just roll it around in there gently. It doesn't look bad. I'll put a small amount of alcohol on my Q-tip and then I'll roll it around. Oop, oop, oop. Alright, so this is a bearing that just fell out. Set her back in. No biggie. I'll keep my finger on that. What you don't want falling out is this roller bearing, because that has like 12 rods inside of a piece of plastic, and it's not much fun trying to get them back in there and to stay. They have to go in from the outside and then the whole unit has to slide up in. I have had one fall out on me in the past. I was able to use grease, real grease, to get them to finally stick. I had to use tweezers and put each piece in separately and then slide the whole bearing back up in there. And it worked fine. It was time consuming to do that. So I'm rolling this around the inside of this. Just trying to absorb all the grease, but it looks like it's pretty dry. There's really not much grease there at all. Now, I'll also take my Q-tip and I'll go around the outside of this one, your ball bearing here, and in the middle. I just broke it free again. No biggie. Just kind of clean it up. Push it back in there again. Alright. There's a bearing inside here. This is a spool bearing. So I'm putting my Q-tip in and I'm just trying to clean any dirt out of there. Look at that. That's dirty. So I'm going to do that again. And I'm using a dry Q-tip here. You could probably use rubbing alcohol if you wanted, but what I don't want to do is leave any alcohol or residue inside of a ball bearing that I don't get out, and then I go back and put a drop of alcohol on it. Okay, so I'm going to pull this bearing cap off now. I'm going to clean the top of this also. This is going to be your best access because you have the most space here to be able to work with. If you ever do use any kind of rubbing alcohol or bearing cleaner on these, you'll need to blow them out with an air compressor before re-lubing them. so that you get all the alcohol out of it, or it will basically break down your new oil. So I'm going to take this bearing, put a drop of oil, one drop, done. We're going to put the cap back on just to make sure it doesn't ever come flying out of there. We don't put it on tight, we leave it somewhat loose till we're done. So as soon as I feel it start snugging up, I'm going to back it off. Okay, the last thing we're going to do to the inside of this side plate here is now we're going to grease this roller bearing we were talking about. The way we do that, so I'm going to take some grease here. I'm going to take a new Q-tip and I'm going to squirt some grease on it. Now usually we're going to use as minimal of grease as possible. However, since it's got to soak into the Q-tip, I use a little bit extra. So I use my fingertip here. So now my Q-tip's yellow. And now I do the same thing. I stick it in, and I just start rolling it and rolling it, rolling around the edges. That's greasing the little rods inside the roller bearing. I'll add just a little more. So just a small little squirt there. Run it around with my finger. Roll it around. Make sure she's nice and greased. Okay, then I'm going to set my side plate back down. So now we're going to come back to our main piece here, and I'm just going to put a light coat of grease basically on everything. On this rod, on these gears, I'm going to squirt a little bit of grease inside the teeth, not a whole lot. So right now it looks like that. I'm going to gently spin it, roll it around. Eventually what's going to happen is it's going to should get on all the gears. We may need a little more. You don't want to put a whole lot of grease because you don't want to gum it up. But when you squirt the grease on there, see, it's not even all going to be down in the gears. So you can use your fingertips, kind of push it down and make sure all the gears get greased good. Make sure it's not riding up. I'm going to hold my finger on top of it just to wipe off the excess. And those are nice and greased. I have extra grease on my fingertips, so I'm going to start sticking it and using the Q-tip and greasing up all the internal parts here that slide. I'm going to actually squirt a little under the release. Go down, go up, go down. Squirt a little above the top of it here. You're going to want a little bit of grease. I'm going to use my Q-tip here and grab this excess, and you're going to want it inside this slot where that slides. If you see any lint, take it off. Don't leave it. That's of course from your Q-tip, which mine's starting to get a little worn, so I'm just going to chunk it. Alright, another Q-tip, put some more grease, because we're going to grease basically everything. We'll get a light coat. I really like the Ardent Real Butter. So I'm going to grease these little rods here that are going to hold the springs. I'm going to grease inside this slide where your release slides up and down. You just want everything nice and smooth, going easy. Now it looks to me like when you buy them new and they come from the factory, they tend to have just globs of grease in them where they just squirted them, which is probably sufficient. That's how the factory does it. I'm gonna put a little grease on these ramps. It's not gonna get a lot. Make sure everything is moving well. So the camera is facing, of course, the opposite way that I'm looking. So I hope that everything is coming out clear. Now notice this plastic piece slides under this metal piece. So I'm going to take my Q-tip so I don't over grease it. I'm just going to go around and try to make sure that has just a light coating of grease, but no accumulation or anything. Okay, stop the camera and I'll start back.